Hey guys, tonight we drift with the current into a patch of ocean so infamous that even your GPS seems to sigh when you type in the coordinates. You know, the one roughly a triangle, stretching from Miami to Bermuda to Puerto Rico. People whisper about vanishing ships, pilots radioing last words, and compasses spinning like they've just chugged 3 espressos. And honestly, if you were ever planning a cruise there, well, good luck. Because your Instagram story might just end mid. That's right, you'd definitely not survive long enough to complain about the wi-fi.c. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments, are you right now, and what time is it? Maybe you're curled up at 2 AM in a tiny apartment. Or maybe you're on a bus trying to drown out the guy blasting music behind you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand on the deck of an imaginary ship, looking out across an ocean that appears calm, but the stories underneath it ripple louder than the waves. The first whispers of this mysterious region stretch back centuries. Sailors of Spain, Portugal, and later Britain passed through these waters, mapping the new world and occasionally vanishing into silence. Imagine yourself as one of those sailors, clutching a salt-stained logbook, noting down the odd behaviors of compasses, or the sudden storms that rose like tantrums of the sea. It's not hard to picture how quickly rumor grows when 3 ships vanish and only gulls remain to tell the tale. One of the earliest tales tied to this patch of ocean involves Christopher Columbus himself. Yes, the same Columbus whose navigational skills got mythologized in textbooks. In his journals from 1492, he described seeing strange dancing lights on the horizon and compasses that refused to behave. You picture him on deck, frowning at a needle that drifts lazily away from north like a teenager ignoring chores. These oddities, recorded in the midst of his voyage, planted the first seeds of what later generations would call the Bermuda Triangle. Was it aliens? Was it faulty 15th century tech? Or maybe Columbus just needed a new set of reading glasses? As trade expanded, the waters grew busier. Merchant ships crossed, carrying sugar, rum, gold, and sometimes secrets. And every so often, a vessel disappeared. You can almost hear the frantic whispers at coastal taverns. Did you hear about the galleon that left San Juan? Never made it. The human mind, ever hungry for patterns, starts weaving a story. 1 ship lost might be bad weather. 2 ships, coincidence. But 3, 4, 5 over decades. That's how legends are born. You step further into history, into the 1600s and 1700s, when privateers and pirates prowled the Caribbean. The sea was both a highway and a hunting ground. A ship that didn't arrive could have been sunk by storms or by cannon fire, conveniently blamed on the mysterious sea. And it's here the first joke sneaks in. You realize pirates basically invented customer service hold music. Except instead of elevator tunes, it was, "Your treasure is very important to us. Please stay adrift while we rob you." Still, the ocean itself had its own arsenal. Sudden squalls, waterspouts, and hurricanes hammered wooden ships with terrifying ease. Picture standing on deck as dark walls of cloud rear up, rain slashing sideways, waves rising taller than any mast. In those days, sailors didn't have satellite forecasts or storm warnings. They had instinct, prayer, and a very wet hat. When a ship went missing, there were no black boxes, no Coast Guard, reports only absence. And absence is fertile ground for myth. Fast forward to the 1800s, and you're hearing about ships like the Rosalie, found drifting with sails set, cargo intact, but no crew aboard. Ghost ship stories float back to port, and the mystery deepens. Was it mutiny, scurvy, or maybe everyone just decided they'd had enough and swam home? Historians still debate whether reports like this were exaggerated by newspapers eager for readers. After all, nothing sells like a spooky headline. The phrase "truth drowned in a barrel of rum" might as well describe half the maritime tales of the era. The 19th century was also when the Bermuda region became more central to global trade. Steamships replaced sails, cutting across the Atlantic in days rather than weeks. Yet even with iron hulls and engines, losses occurred. Each tragedy fed the aura of danger. The Mary Celeste, often mistakenly lumped into Bermuda lore, was actually found adrift far north of the region, but that didn't stop storytellers from dragging it into the legend, like a cameo appearance by the late 1800s. Scholars and sailors alike were both fascinated and uneasy. Some journals mention erratic compass readings, others speak of waters that seemed to boil without reason, and still others report mirages dancing across the horizon. Whether these were natural phenomena or tired eyes playing tricks, they added to the collection of evidence that the ocean here was different. Academic debate brewed. Some argued that the magnetic variation in this region was unusual enough to explain reports. Others insisted the ocean was no different than anywhere else, save for human imagination. Through all these tales, you sense a pattern. The more ships traveled, the more chances for disaster. And yet, every incident was filed away under a single, growing myth. You think about how people love a good mystery more than a mundane explanation. Storm sinks boat is tragic but simple. Ghostly triangle devours ship makes you lean forward, wide-eyed popcorn in hand. Your mind drifts back to Columbus, staring at his misbehaving compass, unaware he was starting a centuries-long rumor. From him to pirate taverns to Victorian ghost stories, you see how the legends snowballed. You even chuckle at the thought. If ancient sailors had read it, the Bermuda Triangle subreddit would have been absolute chaos. Lost 3 ships today, Amma. And as you lean against the rail of this imaginary vessel, you realize the first stage of the Triangle's myth is not about modern science at all. It's about human storytelling, about filling the gaps when explanations are missing, and about our very human need to whisper, something out there is watching. You linger on that thought as the horizon shifts from parchment maps to black and white photographs. The 20th century rolls in, and suddenly, the Bermuda Triangle isn't just sailors' gossip anymore. It becomes a global headline machine. With radios crackling, airplanes buzzing overhead, and newspapers desperate for attention, the legend doesn't just sail, it soars. The story that truly lights the fire begins in December 1945. You picture yourself in a flight suit, helmet strapped, climbing into a Grumman Avenger torpedo bomber at a Florida naval base. It's Flight 19, 5 planes out for a routine training mission. The pilots lift off into clear skies, their engines humming like a coordinated choir. Hours later, the choir turns into static. The radio transmissions come in fragmented. We can't find west. Everything looks wrong. The ocean doesn't look right. It's chilling, like overhearing a friend whispering from another room before the line cuts forever. The planes never return, and the rescue aircraft sent to find them also disappears. If you were a journalist in the 40s, you'd have just stumbled onto the story of the decade. Flight 19 cements the Bermuda Triangle as more than folklore. Now it's tied to modern technology, disciplined pilots, and the unsettling idea that even with compasses and radios, humans can still just vanish. Of course, later investigations point toward navigational errors, fuel exhaustion, and the cruel math of open water. But once the mystery is whispered, it sticks. And, to be fair, Lost in ocean because of fuel isn't nearly as gripping as Triangle swallows squadron whole. In the decades after, more stories pile on. You read about the USS Cyclops, a massive Navy cargo ship that disappeared in 1918 with over 300 men aboard, somewhere between Barbados and Baltimore. No SOS, no wreckage, just gone. The Cyclops becomes the Titanic of Triangle Lorex, with no iceberg, no James Cameron movie, and, tragically, no survivors. Historians argue whether its overloaded cargo of manganese or caused it to capsize, or whether German U-boats played a role during World War I, but the romantic imagination prefers to picture it being dragged into some underwater vortex. And yes, if there had been TikTok back then, you can bet there'd be a trending sound called Cyclops score. The mid-20th century also marks the birth of mass media obsession. Magazines, radio programs, and later, television specials pour fuel on the fire. Authors like Vincent Gaddis publish books coining the term Bermuda Triangle, and suddenly you've got people on both sides, those treating it like a supernatural horror, and scientists rolling their eyes so hard you'd think they'd vanish into another dimension themselves. You wander through this era, noticing how the triangle fits neatly into Cold War anxieties. Nuclear shadows loom, UFO sightings spike, and paranoia thrives. The Bermuda Triangle becomes a stage for every fear: alien abduction, government cover-ups, and even secret undersea bases. Was it coincidence that this all exploded at the same time Roswell stories were booming? Maybe not. Humans love a package deal on mysteries. And here's your first laugh of the night. Imagine the advertising opportunities. If 1950s Madison Avenue had jumped in, you'd probably have seen commercials like Bermuda Triangle cruisers disappear in style. But even beyond the headlines, strange reports keep stacking up. Aircraft vanish between radar sweeps, ships transmit garbled messages before cutting off, and yachts are found adrift without crews. Skeptics point out that heavy traffic, stormy weather, and human error explain most of these. Believers counter with the sheer volume of incidents. The debate sharpens. Are we seeing a dangerous oceanic zone, or simply a dangerous tendency to exaggerate? As you lean into this noisy century, you recall one bizarre detail tucked in the footnotes. In 1963, two KC-135 Stratotanker aircraft reportedly vanished near Bermuda the same day, within minutes of each other. The Air Force later clarified that wreckage from both was found, implying accidents rather than supernatural erasure. But those initial headlines, pure triangle gold. Once the public heard two planes, same day, same place, the myth grew. Another head, Hydra Dash style. By the 1970s, television takes its turn. Documentaries with dramatic narrators, complete with spooky organ music, make their way into living rooms. You almost hear the voice. Could it be the work of extraterrestrials? It's campy, it's sensational, and it works. Book sales skyrocket, and the triangle earns a permanent spot on the pop culture map. Somewhere between Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. Still, behind the noise, serious discussions brew. Naval historians stress that the Atlantic has always been treacherous. Meteorologists point to hurricane paths that cut right through the triangle. Statisticians argue that given the sheer number of ships and planes, accidents are inevitable. But here comes that phrase cook, SPGRVN Tran. C.I. Liu, the legend itself, fueled sloppy reporting. Did people start attributing every maritime mishap in the Western Atlantic to the triangle, whether or not it occurred there? Probably yes. But once a mystery grabs hold, facts struggle to keep up. The century ends with the triangle sitting comfortably in its throne of half-truths and sensationalism. Kids swap stories at sleepovers, tabloids push new disappearances, and scientists issue weary sighs. You, standing here in the middle of the narrative, can feel how myth and media became inseparable. It's less about whether the triangle is real, and more about how a region of water transformed into a cultural icon. And yet, as you glance back at Flight 19's final transmissions, the fear in those young voices, you'll realize that beneath the circus of headlines lies real human tragedy. Families lost sons, brothers, fathers. The ocean doesn't need magic to be merciless. It only needs wind, water, and a little bad luck. The sea around you swells with quieter explanations now, like scientists raising their hands politely in a rowdy classroom. You've seen how the Bermuda Triangle exploded in the 20th century. But here, in the calm middle of the ocean, the voices of researchers lean closer. They don't whisper of aliens or underwater civilizations. They talk of physics, chemistry, and the stubborn unpredictability of weather. You stand on this deck, listening, and it feels like the waves themselves are trying to untangle the mystery. First, you hear about the Gulf Stream, a massive ocean current that moves faster than some rivers on land. It surges through the triangle, like a conveyor belt on turbo mode. Imagine dropping a coffee cup into the water. Here it wouldn't just bob lazily. It would be swept away in minutes, vanishing before you even had time to Google how to save coffee from ocean. For a shipwreck or downed plane, this current means debris scatters far and fast, making rescue efforts nearly impossible. 2. The human eye that looks like a disappearance. To science, it's simply strong plumbing. Then there's the weather. Hurricanes, tropical storms, and squalls form with little warning in this region. You've probably seen those satellite images of massive spirals covering entire states. Now picture being in a small vessel with no radar in the 19th century, or even a bomber squadron in the 40s, with limited instruments. A sudden storm could whip up waves the size of buildings, capsize ships, or disorient pilots. And honestly, have you ever tried driving in heavy rain? Now imagine flying a warplane at 5,000 feet, while your compass spins like a toddler with a fidget toy. But one of the strangest scientific theories involves methane hydrates. These are icy deposits trapped in the ocean floor, capable of releasing giant methane bubbles when destabilized. If enough gas erupts, it can reduce the water's density, making ships lose buoyancy and sink like a dropped phone in a bathtub. Pilots flying low could also face engine troubles if methane clouds rose into the atmosphere. You picture it vividly. A sudden, invisible eruption turning stable seas into a frothing cauldron. Creepy, absolutely, supernatural. Not so much just geology being dramatic. A detail slips in from the fringes of research. Magnetic anomalies. This region sits near a place where true north and magnetic north occasionally align. Sailors in the past, relying only on compasses, could easily become confused. A tiny navigational error magnifies quickly at sea, sending ships hundreds of miles off course. It's not as flashy as alien abduction, but you realize a misplaced degree or two on a compass could be the difference between reaching Miami or ending up in eternal drift. Cook SPGAVN Tran, CI Liu. This explanation fully accounts for the chaos, but many admit it makes the supernatural less necessary. And let's not forget rogue waves, those monstrous walls of water that appear suddenly, towering 30 meters high, capable of snapping ships like toys. For centuries, sailors dismissed them as exaggeration. Only in recent decades did satellites confirm their existence. You imagine a 200-foot wave rising in the middle of the night, blotting out the stars, and you understand why crews may never have had the chance to radio for help. Science, it seems, sometimes proves sailors were right all along. Here comes your first chuckle of the section. Picture the ocean as a prankster with a dark sense of humor. Ships and planes expect calm, and suddenly, whamrock wave, methane, burp, or hurricane tantrum. If Poseidon had a stand-up routine, this would be it. Still, the legends persist, because science, though convincing, rarely captures hearts the way mystery does. Tell someone a hurricane sank the ship, and they nod and move on. Tell them a cursed triangle swallowed it whole, and suddenly they're leaning forward, popcorn in hand. The Bermuda Triangle exists as much in the imagination as in geography, yet, as you lean on the railing of this imaginary ship, you see how these scientific explanations don't dismiss the pain of those who vanished. They humanize it. They remind you that sailors and pilots weren't victims of some cosmic joke. They faced real dangers. Hurricanes that roared like monsters, currents that swept wreckage away, magnetic quirks that tricked compasses. Their tragedies were written not in mystery, but in wind, water, and error. Another strange but lesser-known tidbit drifts your way. Underwater craters, discovered off the coast of Norway, formed by massive methane gas blowouts. Thousands of years ago, some scientists speculate similar processes could exist in the Bermuda region. Imagine giant pits in the seabed, like scars, reminders of the ocean's restless chemistry. Suddenly, the idea of ships vanishing without a trace doesn't sound so supernatural. It sounds like geology being mischievous. By now, your ears are full of scientific voices, layering one over another. Oceanographers map currents, meteorologists chart storms, geologists analyze gas hydrates, and physicists model rogue waves. Each voice doesn't erase the myth, they reinterpret it. They say, the ocean doesn't need magic to be terrifying. And deep down, you feel they're right. Still, you can't resist one more laugh. Picture a group of scientists presenting all these explanations at a press conference, only to have the first question from the audience be, "Yeah, but what about aliens?" The collective groan would echo louder than any hurricane. So here you are, standing between two worlds, the myth that enchants and the science that explains. The Bermuda Triangle no longer feels like an unsolved riddle. It feels like a reminder of how dangerous, unpredictable, and strangely beautiful our planet can be. The mystery may never vanish, but neither will the facts. And that's the paradox that keeps you hooked. Wave after wave, you tilt your head back now, letting your gaze leave the restless water and climb into the sky above. If the ocean has its tricks, the atmosphere has its own arsenal. You suddenly understand why so many disappearances involved aircraft as well as ships. Pilots moving through this vast corridor between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico found themselves at the mercy not only of storms, but of invisible forces dancing in the air. Radio communication, for instance, often faltered in the region. Early 20th century aircraft relied on long-range signals that bounced off the ionosphere, that invisible layer high above Earth. But this layer doesn't sit still. It ripples, changes density, and sometimes swallows signals like a bad cell tower. You imagine a pilot in the 1940s, tapping his headset, wondering if the silence on the other end means his radio is broken, or if his comrades have simply fallen away into static. The Bermuda sky becomes less a dome and more a labyrinth of shifting corridors for invisible waves. Navigation wasn't easier. Compasses pointed wrong often enough that sailors recorded it centuries before. In the air, that effect magnified. Without GPS, a slight deviation could lead a squadron hundreds of miles astray. The pilots of Flight 19 weren't the only ones spooked by their instruments. Reports of compasses swinging wildly fill logbooks, and some researchers suggest these were natural magnetic fluctuations. Historians still debate whether these compass quirks were extraordinary here, or simply more noticeable because the legend magnified every wobble. Still, you picture being in a cockpit at twilight, needle dancing madly, and you feel your pulse quicken. Add to this the notorious microburst columns of air plunging downward from thunderstorms. For modern jets, they're hazardous. For mid-century planes with less power, they were catastrophic. Imagine flying low over choppy seas, when a blast of sinking air forces your aircraft down faster than the engines can climb. No wonder some planes vanished between radar sweeps, their last moments buried beneath waves before ground control could react. And then there's the psychological side. You can't help but laugh, gently, at the human brain's ability to panic. Pilots trained to trust their instruments sometimes abandoned them when readings felt wrong. Over wide, featureless ocean, with clouds pressing down, the horizon disappears. That conditioned spatial disorientation can make you feel like you're banking left when you're actually level, or climbing when you're falling. Combine that with failing radios, misbehaving compasses, and stormy skies, and you've got a recipe for chaos. It's a little like trying to play Mario Kart with the screen turned off. Technically possible, but you're probably driving straight into a banana. One peculiar historical event adds to the pile. In 1965, a DC-3 passenger plane disappeared en route from San Juan to Miami. The weather seemed fine. The last radio call was calm, but the aircraft never arrived. Wreckage was never found. Some point to sudden downdrafts or mechanical failure. Others note the plane was already reported to have electrical issues. Still, the mystery lingers in the silence between that final transmission and the never-seen landing, and as odd as it sounds, mirages also play a role. Pilots have described Fata Morgana illusions, strange, layered reflections of islands or ships floating in the air. Your mind tries to imagine chasing a shimmering island on the horizon, only to run out of fuel over open water. The sea and sky conspire to paint false maps, and the Bermuda region seems particularly fond of such tricks. Here's your mid-air chuckle. If GPS glitches today make you scream at Google Maps for telling you to turn left into the ocean, imagine how 1950s pilots felt when their compasses did the same thing. At least you don't risk vanishing when your phone reroutes through a cornfield. By the late 20th century, the sky's secrets became as much a part of Bermuda lore as the seas. Astronauts even reported unusual cloud patterns and storms forming rapidly in the Atlantic corridor. Scientists explained them as normal atmospheric processes, but believers tucked them away as further proof the triangle was special. The argument spun on: is this region uniquely hostile, or just heavily traveled and overreported? Still, the more you think, the more you realize how unforgiving the sky is. Ships might struggle for hours before sinking, leaving at least some chance of survival. Planes, by contrast, can plummet in seconds, and if they go down in deep water, wreckage is rarely found. Combine that with the Gulf Stream sweeping evidence away, and you see how vanishing acts multiply. You lean back, hearing once more those haunting transmissions, pilots describing their instruments, acting strange, voices strained with confusion. They weren't victims of supernatural forces. They were humans battling storms, magnetic quirks, technical malfunctions, and the limits of their own senses. The Bermuda Triangle may not be otherworldly, but it highlights just how fragile flight once was. And as you breathe in this imaginary salt air, you smile at the irony. We humans once thought the skies would free us from the perils of the sea, only to discover that the heavens had their own tricks waiting. The sea and the sky quiet now, like they've both had their say. What lingers is you, sitting in the middle of it all, watching how myth and science wrestle for the final word. You've heard the legends grow from Columbus's odd compass to pirate whispers, from ghost ships to Flight 19. You've heard the scholars patiently pointing to currents, methane, magnetic quirks, hurricanes, and human error. And yet, even with all this, the Bermuda Triangle refuses to dissolve completely. It's like fog, you explain it away, but the haze still hangs around the edges of your mind. Part of that is because humans love stories more than statistics. A wreck lost to storm surge is tragic, but a wreck devoured by a triangle has staying power. You know this deep down, otherwise, no one would still be talking about it centuries later. Kuk SBGA, Vien Tran, Ci Liu, the mystery, was ever anything more than a media invention. Some say the triangle's fame owes more to paperback thrillers of the 1970s than to any actual danger in the Atlantic. Others insist the pattern of vanishings is real, that even if explanations exist, the sheer concentration here deserves its sinister reputation, and myths have a way of weaving themselves into culture. The Bermuda Triangle shows up in novels, movies, video games, even cartoon episodes where characters vanish with a comical poof. It's shorthand now, say triangle, and everyone understands. You mean the strange, the untraceable, the unexplained. You realize that few geographical spots on Earth carry that much symbolic weight. No one ever made a scary documentary about the mildly confusing rectangle off the coast of Spain. Of course, skeptics never rest. Studies have been conducted comparing accident rates inside the so-called triangle with those in equally busy waters. Statistically, the numbers don't jump out. The Atlantic, in general, is dangerous. Weather shifts rapidly, traffic is heavy, and when things go wrong, there's a lot of water to hide the evidence. In other words, ships and planes are no more likely to vanish here than anywhere else. But you know how hard it is to argue with someone's imagination once they've decided the sea is haunted. Even today, with GPS, satellite tracking, and real-time weather data, accidents still occur in these waters. A small boat disappears. A light plane fails to arrive, and the headlines still invoke the triangle. Logically, you know it's the same risk as anywhere in the vast ocean. Emotionally, though, the triangle still hums with that eerie echo. And then you laugh again, softly, at the absurdity of it all. If the Bermuda Triangle truly were some hungry supernatural vacuum, how would cruise lines keep advertising? Come sail through the devil's trap, Buffett included. It's almost funny how commerce sails cheerfully through a region people once feared to even whisper about. The truth is, the Bermuda Triangle sits at a crossroads of imagination and reality. Sailors really did vanish. Pilots really did send panicked last words. Families really did wait for loved ones who never returned. But the stories we tell about Ither, curses, the aliens, the undersea cities, those belong to us. They're the reflections of our fear of the unknown. Our inability to accept randomness without draping it in myth. And maybe that's why the legend persists. Because deep down, you love a little mystery. You love the idea that the world still has shadows science hasn't completely banished. The Bermuda Triangle is no longer just a patch of ocean, it's a mirror, showing us our hunger for wonder, even when explanations sit plainly on the table. As you lean one last time on the rail of this imaginary ship, you feel both reassured and unsettled. The triangle is not magical, but it's not ordinary either. It's a reminder that the line between myth and fact is thin, and sometimes we prefer to stand with one foot on each side. And now, as the tide of this story ebbs, you feel the pace, slow, like a heartbeat drifting into rest. The noise of vanished planes, ghost ships, and scholarly arguments fades into a gentle hum, the kind you might hear if you pressed your ear to a seashell. The Bermuda Triangle, for all its drama, softens in your imagination. No longer a monster, but a veil thin, shifting, a little mysterious, but never truly menacing. You picture the ocean at night, calm under a crescent moon. The waves roll like breathing, steady, timeless. Every legend you've walked through tonight begins to blur, edges smoothed out by distance. Columbus's compass, Flight 19's, static. Methane bubbles rising, unseen. They all dissolve into the rhythm of water against shore. The mysteries don't need answers here. They simply rock you into a quieter space. Your mind stretches out, like a ship leaving port, but slowly, lazily, not rushing anywhere. The triangle becomes less a danger and more a lullaby. A reminder that the unknown isn't always to be feared. It can also be a soft place to rest your thoughts. And while historians may debate forever, and scientists will keep scanning maps and charts, you realize the ocean will always hold something untold. And that's part of its beauty. So you let the last image fade, stars reflected on dark water. A horizon that never quite ends, and silence wrapping you like a blanket. The Bermuda Triangle remains out there, but here, in this moment, it's just another piece of the great, quiet world.